First of all, welcome everybody today for the recruitment session of DSIF Investment Fund. My name is Marius Lupulescu and I'm the network director, and I'm going to be giving you the presentation today. So without further ado, let's get into it. This is basically just to give you some more information about what we're actually doing, what we're looking for, and general activities of the board and so on. And to go through to what we're going to cover today, first of all, I thought it was necessary to give a small introduction to what venture capital is, what's a venture capital fund, private equity, and basically anything about that. Then what do those venture capital funds actually do, what they invest in, and so on. Then we're going to go into what DSIF actually is and report that to other venture capital funds and a bit of the differences or similarities and so on. Then the media theme part, where you're basically everybody's present right now, and you're gonna be able to ask questions at the end of the presentation in some breakout rooms, like general questions or specific questions for each board member. I'm gonna present you what do we actually do, day-by-day activities, or in general, other activities that we are part of. How does our investment process work, which is one of the very important activities throughout the year as a board member. What are our goals or visions in general as individuals and even as a board, because that's what we actually are. And lastly, what everybody's here today, what are we looking for? What are the board's positions and what do we want those board positions to fulfill? So first of all, is to mention that venture capital is part of private equity. Private equity is the ownership or interest in any entity that is not publicly listed. That means that any company, almost any company, before going public, before going their stocks and shares public, they're in the private sector. The thing is, you can have any type of company here, new, very old, and so on, but it just decided not to go public. Some of them never go public because of that. Then that comes in here, what's a venture capital fund? Well, venture capital funds only invest in the private equity sector because they manage the money of some investors who seek private equity stakes in a startup. The way the investment works, a VC fund invests capital in startups in exchange for equity in the company, so shares or stocks in the company, but they also help them provide professional help, network opportunities, and so on. It also happens that sometimes you buy some shares and you also have some sale on other shares. But this is a very general thing about venture capital, and it's not really needed to discuss right now. Then what do venture capitalists invest in? And this is the best case scenario. First of all, you want something with a low risk. So you don't want to lose your money, or at least you have the lowest chances of losing your money. You want them to be able to grow. You want to predict how much they're gonna grow, how fast they're gonna grow, what market are they gonna grow in, and so on. But the worst thing about this, unfortunately, is that they need a lot of capital to function, to scale up, and so on. In reality, it's not actually like this. So in venture capital funds, especially in our case, you invest in very early stages, which is seed or pre-seed, which I'm gonna tell you in a bit. And because of that, everything is unsure in those stages of the startup. You do some evaluations, you analyze the startups and so on, but it's only about maybes or assumptions and so on. So what you're gonna have is very high risk, but you're also gonna have a very high reward. Because if you invest in earlier stages, you're gonna invest less capital for, let's say, 10% of the shares in a startup. But later on, someone can invest 1 million and get still 10% of the shares. But at the end of the day, you're gonna be the ones who are gonna win more. And the thing that also stays true though is the huge capital requirements, unfortunately. And getting a startup or going further is not that easy because at the end of the day, 90% of the startups fail. It doesn't mean that if you get a venture capital investment, that you're actually going to be successful. It's an indication sometimes. And yeah, if you get an investment from venture capital, then it means that you're doing something, that you're at least on the right track. But still, maybe not 90%, let's say at least 80% is still a very big percentage. The thing is that 75 of those startups fail to return capital. Basically, when you invest those money in a startup, they're more or less in debt to you, and they need to return this money. And they might have money at the time to work, but in the long term, they're not gonna get enough to give them back. And you're not the only investor, most likely. And the thing is that also 80% of those fail to raise after seed. As I said, you can actually get some investment, but then if you don't launch up, if you don't, you're not motivated enough to actually do something, then you're not gonna scale up to it. And that was what DSIF actually is. So as you might have understood so far, we're a venture capital fund, and we're managed by students from the University of Twente and Saxion of University of Applied Sciences. We were established in 2016 and can be regarded as the first student-run European venture capital fund. We, as any other venture capital, invest into startups, but in our case, we only focus on those created by students, bachelor, master's, PhD, or even recent graduates. But our main goal is to help young student entrepreneurs to turn their ideas into real things, real startups. We do that, but not only providing capital, but we also connect students with other professional parties. We give advice. We connect people with other professional advisors. We help them look for follow-up investments and way more other things. As I said, everybody from the board is present now. So after the presentation, you're going to have 10 to 20 minutes, depends, to contact each one of us and talk in one of the breakout rooms. And further on, after the presentation, you can contact us via email. So what do we actually do? What do we offer for the startups? Well, we invest in we support startups in the pre-seed and seed phases. That means that the company has an idea or a proof of stage concept. Sometimes that might imply a prototype and minimum viable product, at least something to work on, to work with, and rarely a customer base, but not very established. In this case, a prototype is it's an idea that is funding to bring it to life. So we can offer capital for that to look for materials, software, or even group teammates. Then you can also have a pilot project. So if you have an already existing customer, but it's not really established, or someone that's willing to engage with your thing, we can support that too. We can help you with that. We can also expand on it. And then lastly, if the startup is doing well, after quite some time, we're going to look for scaling up. So this is when you have a validated idea that's ready to go further on. We're going to help with capital and mostly, which is very important in this case, contacts, other venture capitals, other investors, and so on. How much do we actually invest? Well, our investment capital starts from 5 to 50,000 euros by means of a convertible loan. We call those tickets, let's say, but in most cases we invest around the maximum amount. What a convertible loan means is that the investment amount starts off as a loan that needs to be paid back in full plus interest. That's the loan part. And the maturity date is usually at 3 years. It's negotiable. You're gonna see this one if you do it. After the maturity date, the investment amount has the option to be converted. So it's gonna be converted into shares. Let's say 5% in a company. Also, everything is negotiable, but that's the thing of the deal. You need to negotiate all the terms. And where DSIF shines, I like to say it, but maybe not so much as a venture capital itself, is that startups that go bankrupt they're not liable for it. So even if they have to give the money back in full return, but they can't, well, we cannot really get them responsible for that, unfortunately, and we're just gonna cry together with them. So what do you look for in a startup? And this is pretty general things, but it's good to mention because it makes part of our daily activities. We look for a good team, so they need to be competent, motivated, and diverse, either as a background or a study. At least they need to make a working team. They need to have a growth potential. In general, this is characterized by scalability of their idea, product, service, and so on. They can be started locally in Enschede and expand to Angelo, Almelo, and so on, but it can also be in the whole Netherlands or even internationally. They also need to offer something. They need to have a value proposition. They need to have a demand. They need to have a clear problem that has a demand and a solution. And at the end of the day, it's also better if they have a competitive advantage. You can maybe do another social media platform. it's nothing is impossible, but what do you offer in terms of compared to Facebook or Instagram in terms of your proposition? Then how are they going to achieve this? This is basically to the strategy they use. Of course, there's like the financial projections, but because this is an early stage startup or more or less an early stage startup, the financial part is a lot of assumptions, but you still need those to make yourself credible. You also need to have a marketing plan. How are you going to get yourself known? How are you going to get your idea to the public? How are you going to build a build a customer base out of that? You also need to assess your risk, so you need to have a backup plan. You need to have something to fall on, and this is usually very appreciated and in a very important focus. And at the end of the day, you need a target market. Uh, this is a bit of a mixed bag because, for example, you can have a phone. You can consider that the market size is very big. The market growth is also very high. But then you think a bit more about it and you say there's Samsung, there's Huawei, there's iPhone, there's so many big people on the market already. And even though the market is promising, how are you going to penetrate the market? So that's a lot of things to consider in here. And then we go through the whole investment process. Not really the investment process itself, but how we get the investments coming in, how do we assess them, how do we make the deal, and so on. So the deal sourcing phase comes from two ways, active or passive. Active investment, active deal sourcing comes from participating in various events. For example, a Hive One, there's a lot of incubators or startup programs in the area, such as Hive One. There's some in Saxon as well. The novelty startup and advanced programs, UT challenges, and so on. So we participate in some of those either as a dragon or a coach and as a judge and so on. And we get startups coming to our deal. We tell them what we offer, what do we need, and then they come to us basically. And in a passive way, there's a lot of social media presence through word of mouth. Is just getting people to know about us, and they're just naturally going to come to us to look for investments. Then how do we assess the startups? There's a procedure, which I'm going to get right into it in a bit, that has 3 steps, a one pager, a business plan, and a pitch. If all of those are completed, then we proceed to the deal making phase. There's some terms that before starting working as a board member, there's going to be an introduction phase where all of those venture capital / deal making terms are going to be presented. You also have to consider that there's a due diligence coming afterwards, after the decision itself. So you're going to decide to invest in a startup, but then you're going to make a summary of some sort on each aspect that the startup needs to hit upon, so that you're saying, yes, I'm definitely going to invest in them. They look very good on paper as they look on during the pitch, during the one pager, during the business plan. And then actually during the investing part, we're going to negotiate the convertible loan I said about, the maturity date, the sales on shares, and so on. And after that, well, the interesting part comes in, and I know that's quite something, the monitoring and supporting of the startup. Each startup needs a different way to take care of them, to support them afterwards, and that's where the fun comes in. But how does this investment procedure work? First of all, startups submit a one-pager. This is very straightforward. It's one page about what the startup is about, general information about it, what do they offer, blah, blah, blah. What you do as a board member, we're going to assess the one pager. We're going to give them some feedback, a decision. Is it good enough? Does it go to the second phase? Is not good enough, but needs some improvement? And that's what usually happens. With a one pager, the improvement can happen quite a few times because it's also easy to check. It's a one pager. You can see it very fast if it's working or not. In case if it's working, you go to the second phase, which is the business plan. We also have one blog written about this. There's also a lot of things on the internet. What does this to cover? What is the structure? What you should say about your startup? What things need to be covered, etc., etc. After this is good enough, we also give an assessment on this with all the board. We generally tackle this in one of our board meetings. But this is a bit more not so deep. It's a bit different from the one pager, because in this case it happens that a startup can improve once or twice, but if they also fail to meet our requirements the third time, then maybe it's a sign that they're not worth investing in. So, or they're gonna come back at a later stage. We're gonna tell them, hey, this is not good enough for now. I think you should work a bit more on this, go through some programs and so on, and then come to us again. Yet again, they might pass in this case, and they go to the third step, which is pitching in front of the board, the student board, and the senior board. Lastly, we're gonna make the last decision if we invest in them or not. There's gonna be a lot of discussions in the board. There's gonna be a lot of discussions with the senior board, which they're a bit more experienced. I'm also gonna explain what they do in a bit. And if we actually decide to invest in them, we're gonna agree on the terms that I told you about before. You're gonna make the due diligence, and then you're gonna sign the deal. And from then on, we're gonna help the startup grow. We're basically going to add value to the startup. We're going to share our professional network with the others, and we're also going to help to look for follow-up investments. It's very unsure from then on what's going to happen, but that's the fun of it. Then the way the organization works, there's a general assembly, a general meeting. This usually happens 2 or 3 times a year with the general shareholders, the senior board, and then the board. The senior board is formed of the student board, which is the 6 people that are present today that we're opening the recruitment for. And the senior board, there's kind of some parts of the founders as well, and some people that are experienced in the entrepreneurial area, venture capital area, that have quite some connections. They have quite some experience. They're very veteran in what they're doing, and they're very useful generally. And then we have the ambassadors, which I like to call them the little helpers of the boards. I'm going to explain them in what all of those entail in a bit. Last but not least, as a venture capital, as DSIF, as whatever, you need to find the unicorn. There's a lot of startups that come into our deal flow and then we invest in, but there's so little of them who we actually invest in. You need to find the unicorn, how it's called in the entrepreneurial community. What does it actually mean to be a unicorn? Well, startups that have reached a valuation of at least $1 billion or 1 billion in general, and that's quite high. Starting to invest them like 5K in such a startup, the convertible loan can turn very big in quite some time. They need to have a scalable business model that promises rapid growth. This is the best case scenario, but it's most likely never going to happen like this. And I would say we have quite an advantage because in our region, both universities are quite technical. They have a technical focus at least. And it happens that a lot of startups who come in our deal flow, they're very tech oriented. This is kind of also the recipe for a successful startup. So we're good with that. We're actually very good with that. And it's not no capital requirements. It's not only that they need capital, they need more than just that. They need all the help they can get, basically. And now the actually important thing that everybody might have come here today is what are we looking for? What are the available board positions? As things are now, most of the people on the board are going to leave. So we're going to recruit quite a lot of board positions. We have the brand director, the network director, the deal flow, the portfolio, and lastly, the ambassadors, which is not only one person, but these are the little helpers that I told about before. And there's not really a limited number, but we're also going to consider to keep it low. As a board member, you should work at around 10 to 15 hours per week. We have a weekly board meeting. We have a monthly weekly board meeting that we're going to update everybody on each one of us on our activities. We're going to ask for some help if needed. And it might happen that throughout the year when there's those entrepreneurial events, as I said, the UT Challenge, for example, there's a lot of startups coming into the deal flow. And because our deal flow is a bit flooded at the time, we might need to have 1 or 2 extra board meetings per month other than the weekly ones, which you call them deal flow meetings. And yeah, it totally depends what's going to happen. Then you have the monthly senior board meetings, which acts as a normal board meeting, but you're going to update the senior board about what's happening. You're gonna ask them for some help, and this is usually when there's a startup that we can invest in. After the pitch, that's what happened. That we're also present. They also participate in it. We're gonna discuss about the startup. They have more knowledge, so at the end of the day, they might know something that we want. So that's very good. You also have the quarterly general meetings. So that's how I was like around 3 times per year or so, where you're all gonna do the same thing as the senior board meeting, just maybe in a more formal way. That you're gonna inform the stakeholders how is it going, how did you improve from one meeting to the other, because you're gonna set some goals and you need to work on them. How did you do that? Is it good? Is it not? And basically, you choose your own pace. I'm not really saying that you should work 10 to 15 hours per week, every week. Of course, there's gonna be more work at the start where you're gonna have to learn a bit what's happening and so on. At the end, when we're doing now the recruitment and so on, it's a bit more work. But it also depends on you. You can work 50 hours if you want this week. I'm not gonna stop you. Nobody's gonna stop you. But you're also gonna work 0 hours next week at least as long as you have a balance. What are the responsibilities as a venture capital in this case? You actively scout the startups, the startup investments by participating in those events that I told about. You participate again in a lot of activities that stimulate entrepreneurship, that get people in coming in our deal flow, in our portfolio, and so on. You keep in touch with the startups that you're tasked with, that you contact the startup. You're kind of the contact person after all, so you need to keep in track with what they're doing. You analyze a lot of startup applications, the one pagers, the business plans, and ultimately the pitches. And you, at the end of the day, you decide whether an investment is worth pursuing or not. This is like the end goal, I would say. Each one of of those director position entails something else that you can maybe discuss further on with the respective people in the breakout rooms. But I'm gonna give a small description of each one of them. As a brand director, you maintain and you grow social media presence: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, you name it, everything. You build brand awareness, so you just make yourself known in this region as a venture capital, as a student organization, as everything your values fit with. There's a lot of online and offline marketing, and you should generally reach out to the students in the region. That's the end goal of it. You should make yourself known. You should get people to come to you and just focus on this region, basically. So that's me, the network director. I'm responsible for any external communications. Uh, Basically, you can organize any and participate in any entrepreneurial events. You're kind of the person who needs to know about those or go about to those. You can also get someone else in it as well, but it's kind of your responsibility. You need to you looking for constantly creating new partnerships, even with the existing ones, novelty, high value, and so on. You just need to strengthen the bonds you already have, but you also need to create some new ones. You can look, for example, for some companies consultancy companies that give consultants about loans, investments, and so on. You can also keep in touch with other venture capitalists that might want to syndicate an investment. So they might want to invest with you together. If a startup needs, let's say, 200,000 euros, we can pitch in 50,000, and the other venture capital or more can do the other remaining 150K as well. You scout student startups and generally stimulate the entrepreneurship, but that's what everybody does. It's a bit more of your responsibility than the others. And you keep in touch with the existing community. You basically have a list of important people that you need to know in this area that you're going to work with in a way or another, and you need to kind of go to a coffee with them. Just that's how I would like to call it. As deal flow director, you're the main person that takes care of startups that coming in. So you oversee that incoming startup investments. You're basically, even if everybody's a contact person, at the end of the day, you're kind of the first contact person between the fund and the potential startups. You might also have heard about the startups and a startup and something like that. Send it to another board member, but all the meetings that they're gonna have, you're also kind of aware of what's happening more than the others. And generally, you assist them throughout the investment process. So you should more or less assist them in the one pager a bit more than the others, in the business plan a bit more than the others, and after the pitching phase also a bit more than the others. Then we talked about the things that the startups that are coming in, that want to come in, but what about the ones that are already existing? Well, that's where the portfolio director comes into play. You manage the startups that are already in the portfolio of the fund. You oversee their development, changes, and needs. You constantly keeping track of what they're doing, what they need, and so on. Because they might need the support, they will definitely need the support. You actively offer tailored support to startups. Some of them, for example, might need to build an app. They have a minimum viable product working, but they don't have a team. So your task with looking together for a team. There's also some organizations who focus on this. They make their money, for example, by building apps for people. So what you're gonna do, you're gonna put them in contact with those people, because you also give them the money to procure this app development thing. And this is generally done by supporting the startups using the funds network, which everyone is going to help with, also the network director and so on. But this is all about the positions as the directors. And now I'm talking about the ambassadors, which are the little helpers. Let's say that on average, you have 5 working hours per week. The thing is, it's a project-based position in the fund. That means that you support the actual board members throughout the year. In whatever they want to do. They want to make a social media post. They want to make a blog. They want to organize an event. Well, that's where you're going to come in. You're going to be asked if you want to help with that. And you can basically take on as many projects as you want. At the same time, it's not really against the rules for yourself to come up with an event, an idea or something that you can explain or pitch in front of the board, and the board can accept that. If you want to do an event, for example, it's easier to just go to the network director to explain him what's happening, what's the deal, and so on, and he can just support you in it. But that's all you need to know. So you basically have a flexible implication in projects depending on your schedule. It's not mandatory to do a certain amount of projects per year. You can do one in a month. The next month you can do none, and the next month you can do 10. It totally depends. So at the end of the day, the possibility is to help in projects for multiple disciplines. By disciplines, I kind of mean that an event, a social media post, also you can help the finance director, for example, with the budget. That's different disciplines, so it totally depends on what you're looking for and what your interests are. So yeah, there's a lot of choice, there's a lot of flexibility, both as an ambassador, as a board member, and it's totally up to you how you work with it, but you're gonna have the president on your back making sure that you're doing your job, just so you know. Last but not least, just a small reminder, the application deadlines are gonna be on the 30th of April, which means this Friday at midnight or something. So they're gonna be closing pretty soon. Yet again, thank you everyone for the attention. If you have any general questions, feel free to shoot them up right now. If you have any board specific questions and so on, after let's say 5 or 10 minutes or when the general questions are done, you can ask them in the breakout rooms. And don't feel free to contact us if you have any general questions whatsoever.
Great. Before everybody starts moving, I think I'd just like to add, like, Marius, thank you very much for the very extensive explanation as to what we do, what our operations are, and just generally what people can expect. And I think it's important to also let people know that we also started this not knowing what everything was. So it is really the most important thing is your willingness to learn and to understand what is happening. So we're not really looking at, have you been in finance before or something of that nature. It's just your willingness to learn, your drive, your passion. And if that is well put, then I don't see why you could not be in the next board. But yeah, look forward to your questions, and yes, let's get started.
I have a quite general question, if I may speak. I'm not sure how this is supposed to work.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's probably a question that boards generally get asked quite a lot, but how did the COVID affect DSIF specifically? Did you get more deals actually, or was there a lack of motivation from students and entrepreneurs?
Well, I wouldn't say there's I cannot also really compare it to previous year, but I wouldn't say there were less people again. Maybe the start was a bit harder than before, of people coming in. But generally, when those events happened, like the UT Challenge, the Hive on Dragons, and so on, the deal flow was pretty much the same as usual. Even throughout the year, we just got different types of people coming in. Let's say at least they were a bit more focused on the making their startups corona proof. So that was a general, definitely something that I could see in the deal flow, but I wouldn't say it changed that much in terms of volume.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I also have a question regarding the application. So I understand we can apply for all of the, if we like want to just get one of the board functions. Well, I have a preference, but if I just want to get one of them, then I should just apply to all of them, or how is it like? As in,
Emilia, do you maybe want to answer that one?
So preferably apply for one position, but the multiple choice was made only because if you, for example, are not confident, maybe you want to be director, but also you want to be ambassador. So for this particular reason, it was created, the multiple choice in the application.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You can go first if you want.
No, that's fine. You can go first.
Yeah, I was wondering, first of all, thank you so much for the presentation. It was really informative, but I also have a general question. I was wondering, where do you guys get the money from to invest? Because I was checking your website, I could not find this. So do you get this from people, like from other people, other investors, and then do you invest that in the name of them, or do you get it from the university? I was just curious about this.
Actually, we have a page on the website, shareholders
Oh, you do?
and partners. Yes, I will put the link in the chat. You can check it out.
Yeah.
So those shareholders, 5 of them, University of Twente, Saxion, Student Union, and 2 others, they are our shareholders. So they provide money.
All right. Yeah. Okay, thank you. And I was also wondering, like, sorry to ask a lot of questions now, Amanda. I know you want to go, but how many applications do you usually get, like, per year? What's like an estimate of a number?
I think I can answer this one. Yeah, that's a really tough question. I think it's around 30 to 50, but it can sometimes really go up per month, and then some months we have none. So it can really go up and down. Of course, this year we had a little bit less of the more active deal flow, because in the past, of course, we were in our office and we were walking around the campus as well, attending events. But now it's all online and it's not always the same exposure. So most of the deal flow that we've been having the last, let's say, 6 months has mostly been passive. So via the website or just somebody reaching out to us. Yeah.
All right. Well, I have a few more questions, but I'll let Amanda go first now.
Thanks a lot, by the way. Yeah, so thank you for the presentation. I'm Amanda, I'm a student from Saxion, and just out of curiosity, I would like to ask, what is the minimum stake of percentage do you require as a return of investment for each startup?
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
Stake of percentage. So in the end, what will you get? 20% of the ownership of the company, or maybe 30? Because I know as an angel investor, you usually get 20 to 25%. So yeah, how about you guys?
Yeah, so we work on the basis of a convertible loan agreement. So initially, it's essentially like a bank loan. You could consider it that way. But then, of course, if there's a follow-up investment, so that's an actual financial investment that is related to equity. So let's say we invest 50,000 in the company, and later down the line, let's say a year later, another angel investor, for example, decides to invest in the company. We do not decide exactly how much a company is worth at the point of us investing the 50,000. We follow on the angel investor's decision. So let's say the angel investor believes that this company is now worth 200,000. Then we will convert our loan to an equity investment based on the past event, based on the evaluation of the the angel investor. So we do not actually have a minimum. Well, we can set a minimum conversion rate. Of course, this is usually around 5% because it's very early phase of a startup investment. But the way that our investment works, I would really encourage you to research convertible loan agreements, because it's kind of tough to just explain it in a couple minutes here. But just research that, and then you can understand how exactly we're different than, for example, an angel investor. Because we try not to take shares out of a company at such an early phase, because it's really hard to evaluate when a startup is really the phase that we usually see at the University of Twente or in Saxion, to actually make that decision of how much a company is worth. So we wait till later points when an angel investor or more experienced investor makes a decision, and then we kind of piggyback off of that.
Okay, it's all clear now. Yeah.
If you have more questions, you can just join my session breakout room afterwards. I'll be more than happy to explain.
Perfect. Yes. Thanks, by the way.
I have a question or two. This position, when would the starting period be, and for how long? Either director or ambassador.
So the new board or ambassador would start from 1st of September this year, and would officially they would end their time next year, also 1st of September. There's a possibility to stay 2 years in the boards, but it's up to you if you want.
I'm asking because I'm expecting to graduate this year, actually in July. So I'm wondering, is it still possible to do this while not being a student, or is it even feasible?
Well, the priority, of course, students, because it's student-run venture capital fund. So.
Okay.
And I believe, just to address that, I believe in the deed of incorporation of DSIF, it does accommodate people that have graduated, but obviously you'd only be able to do approximately 1 year and not far into your second year of being a graduate. So the possibility, I think, still stands. According to the deed of incorporation, you are allowed to. So the opportunity is not taken from you, but yeah, it's still possible to.
Okay, thank you.
If I may ask a question, thank you very much for the talk. It was very interesting. I was kind of wondering, kind of based on Fabian's question as well, how many companies do you have in your current portfolio? Because what I see on the website, it was like 3 or so, which doesn't seem like that much, but yeah. How does the portfolio actually look like?
That is true. We have 2 portfolio companies currently. And we have invested, the first investment took place in 2017, if I'm not wrong, 2017 or 2018. But that was, that company went bankrupt. So right now we have 2 companies in our portfolio. And we are a small fund. We are not a huge fund, as you can see from the capital that we invest in potential startups. So that is the status.
So then how many companies roughly do you add a year to the portfolio?
It depends. You can have, you don't have any companies coming to your portfolio as well.
Yeah. So
type of deal so we get sign up.
Yeah, to add on that, so DSIF was started in, I think, 2016, 2015, right? And then we had our first investment around that year or later that year. But in between 2016 and 2019, there was quite a long period of time where there was no actual follow-up investments from DSIF. And then 2019, we had Logomogo, 2020 Eden, and then 2021 we have currently Clarify. So I would expect usually in the current state that we are at, like, let's say 1 to 2 investments per year.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I have another question. What would you say was the biggest challenge for you when you started as a director?
For me, it was understanding the convertible loan agreement, like the legal jumbo stuff that's in the documents, to understand exactly what everything means, and then also be able to actually explain it to somebody else, to a startup, and have them understand it in the easily as well.
Yeah, I would say my most challenging thing, for lack of a better word, was just really understanding your position and your role and how it plays into the bigger picture. Because obviously you're working with other people, so you need to understand that. And also just understanding what the core of DSIF is and why we operate. So once you get the purpose of why you're operating, then I think everything else just falls into place, basically.
Okay, thank you.
I'm assuming there are no other general questions, so maybe I know you can do the breakout rooms.
I do have a few more questions. Sorry, sorry to interrupt you. Are there any plans to increase this 50K to maybe a larger number? Are you guys talking with other potential investors to invest in your fund, or how does this go?
Yeah, we are at the moment like working towards increasing our capital to the capital aggregate of €1 million. And obviously, should we reach that goal, then we have a bit more flexibility as to what the ticket size is, for example.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, but also, of course, the question is do startups really need more than 50,000? Because what we usually see is that the way this is very early stage investment, and usually they combine it with something, let's say the top financiering, which is also another 40,000 on top. So do startups, if we realize that startups do really need more than the 50,000 that they're offering, then of course we would like to increase the ticket size if the amount of money that DSIF has allows for that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. So what's DSIF's role after the funding? Like once the funding is done, like what kind of handholding or what kind of feedback thing we'll be having after that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? Because at least
Oh,
for me,
okay.
there were some difficulties with audio.
Yeah, sure. So I was trying to ask what kind of like interactions do we have the startups after the DSIF, after we release the funds? Do we release the funds in a go, or do we stage wise release the funds?
Okay, so
Tom, you may want to answer it for him.
Yeah, that's good. That's why we have a portfolio director. So I think Tom can take this up.
Well, I'm trying to answer it the way I understood it, because the internet connection is quite bad. The way I understand is you want to know what role DSIF plays basically after the investment. And I can tell you that DSIF tries to support its startup and its portfolio in every way. This is mostly through supporting in looking for another funding, or for example, through connecting them with our intern portfolio, intern network. So basically here as a portfolio director, you're basically something like the intern networking guy.
Okay.
I hope this answers your question.
Yeah. Thank you.
If there are no further general questions, then I'm actually just going to start out the breakout rooms. So there are a couple of breakout rooms. We have one for networking, portfolio, brand, deal flow, and then we have one as well for investors. If everything's working properly, which I hope it will be, you should be able to just join your breakout room. Just clicking one of the, there should be a pop-up where you can choose to join the breakout room, and then you can speak with them and ask your questions directly to each of the members. Representing ambassadors will be our president and finance director, as they're actually going to stay on the board next year. So if you'd like to talk to them as well, of course, you can just join in the ambassadors group chat. So I'm going to open all the rooms now, and then hopefully all of you should be able to join the room.